I remember days they used to laugh at me. Used to show them on my records talking casually. Used to say it was a passion on my path to be. Then they told me that I couldn't, so I had to be. Tell me what they really think about it now. Used to hate it, but I guarantee they're proud. Had to do it just to show them that I could, yeah. Now I finally think I took it where I should, yeah. Had a jokes on you and now you're on and laughing. I did a whole lot of winning. Look, it came from a passion. I see a whole lot of knowings. I could see now in public and that may think a lot of things. Man, at least think something, now you the judge. Hey, now tell me where you ended up, yeah. Look, I bet it was a simple job, yeah. Look, I went and took a different route, yeah. Look, that's why my life is different now. Back in my feelings, look, when I wasn't so gifted and I was learning to do this, and all I heard were the critics, and I don't blame you for that shit. Look, I was way out the basis, but I just needed some talent so I could wait this to greatness, oh yeah. You ain't ever think this, no, no, no. Stop me while I started, homie, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now this shit settled, it's go better and better, but I'll always remember, yeah, yeah.
Yo, it's your boy C-Roc here, That One Podcast from That One Studio. We're not on the road today. We're back at the home studio, but I got my man Chris Naugle with us. I've known Chris for a few years now, from, just going to events, Secret Knock, shout out to Greg Reed, and love what he does. And I've always had a lot of questions about this, but you know how life is and running a business, you just kind of get distracted. So we got him in here today to share with you what he's doing, where he came from, and then also the evolution of the infinite banking and the things that he's working on with this. With all the changes that are coming out, and I'll let him speak on that. Chris, what's happening, man?
Not much, man. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, I love your studio, dude.
I appreciate it.
The purples like black, white, and purple is like that one color. So I love the vibe that you have there.
That wasn't intentional either. It just kind of happened.
It kind of reminds me of the casino in Vegas, the Cosmopolitan.
Oh, I love the Cosmo. Yeah, totally.
I see the light at the top too, like the chandelier. They have the chandelier bar.
That's like my favorite bar. When I'm in Las Vegas, I always have to visit that place.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's the vibe I see. All right, man, let's get into it, dude. First of all, I think you were a professional snowboarder. Is that what I understand?
Yep, I sure was.
So you grew up skiing and all that? And
never skied a day. Well, actually, that would be a lie. I skied one time, and it was because I was dating a girl who skied, and she's like, you got to try it. So I put the skis on, went up the lift, made it halfway down the hill, unstrapped the skis, walked down the hill, and strapped my snowboard back on. That's my skiing story.
I skied one time, and I thought, like I was a football player, so I thought I was a badass. And I didn't want to get off at the first stop of the lift. So I went all the way to the top, and I fell off the lift. Or I didn't fall off the lift, but I got off and I fell right away. And the guy that's up there, he's like, dude, you don't belong up here. But I had to get down, so I figured it out. But that was my story from skiing. I'm a beach guy, but. So how did you get into snowboarding for the first place? And then what did it really take to go professional? Like what can this, sacrifices and all that?
A lot. So, I'm from Buffalo, New York, first off. It's not the mecca for snowboarding. So my snowboarding started, I was a skateboard kid. And my buddy Jack, who I rode dirt bikes with, and we skateboarded a lot, one day shows up at my house with this big skateboard. And it had straps on it. I'm like, I didn't even know what it was. And he's like, it's a snowboard. It's a skateboard for snow. I mean, you got to understand, I'm getting a little older now, and this is going back, this is the 80s. Snowboarding was not mainstream by any stretch. So we strapped in, we're bouncing around on it in the garage, and winter came, and we went up the hill where we rode our dirt bikes. We had these like, it was a racetrack which had hills in it. So I'd strap in the snowboard and I'd go straight down the hill, and that was where it all began. Well, I didn't come from a family with money, so I didn't have money to go to the resorts. I remember the one day that my mom, I had asked her for a snowboard for Christmas, and she got me a used board. This is back in the fluorescent days. I had fluorescent green pants, a pink, black, and like magenta jacket. I mean, we're going back to those years.
Yeah.
But I remember she got me that board. It was the greatest day, because that day I took the board up the hill. I started building jumps. We'd build them out of snow and sticks. Well, I mean, that's all we knew how to do. And I would practice, and that evolved. Still couldn't go to the resorts. And then I would go to the country club, which is kind of by where I went to school, and it was in a ravine. And I had watched enough videos to know what a jump looked like at this point. So I would build a jump out of the sand trap, and I would practice all the tricks that I'd see in the magazines or on the videos that I had. And I did this every single day in the winter. I would build the jump, hike up the hill, hit it, practice the trick, master it. And then I started going to the resort like once or twice a week on ski club. And that's where it all began. But, that's not the most important part. The most important part was you have to believe something's possible. And up to that point, I watched videos. I thought it'd be cool to be a pro snowboarder. But again, I lived in Buffalo, New York. We got a lot of snow, but we don't have mountains, and it's not really anything going on back then in snowboarding. But I had caught wind that there was 2 pros, Blair and Shane, and I knew who these guys were from the videos. They were coming to my home resort, Kissing Bridge, and it was during the week they were going to be filming. So I showed up that day. I remember seeing these guys, and it's like, just stardom. I'm just like this little kid, and I see these 2 pros, and all I started doing is just tracking them up the hill and through the park. And the one guy, Blair, who's now a dear friend of mine, saw me, and he's like, hey, what's going on? And I was so nervous. I don't even think I spoke to him. And he's like, hey, you want to ride with us? So I started riding with him, and that was like the greatest day of my life. But what it did is it showed me it was possible. So at that point, the only thing that I had my mind set on was becoming a pro snowboarder. Every one of my trapper keepers that I took to school had snowboarding drawings on it. I mean, listen, like they call it vision boards, and Greg Reed, he's big on this.
Yeah.
I was creating a real vision board, and it was just me visualizing every single day myself being a pro snowboarder. So at the age of 19, I went on and I became a pro snowboarder, signed my first contract, and it was freaking hard, man. It was just doing what everybody else was unwilling to do.
Yeah. And then when you get this, you go pro, what does that look like schedule wise? And
it was a whole different world. So when I went pro, I had my snowboard shop. So I had started a chain of, at this point it was just one shop. In November of 1994, Fat Man Board Shops opened up, and I was one of the partners. I eventually became the sole owner of it. So I had my shops going on while I was traveling around and snowboarding. And while I was traveling to go to, usually everything was Vermont back then, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, I would bring my clothing line, which I had called Fat Clothing Company, with me, and I would sell it to stores along the way down the 90. And that's kind of how I got into wholesale and how I actually opened my first shop. So what happened is, as I went pro, my travel schedule changed because now I'm flying all over the place to attend these photo shoots, these competitions. But at that point, I had my shops, and I had my manager, Randy, and I had a couple of my other friends, Nate and a few of the other guys, working at the shop. So I would promote Randy into a higher position, so he wanted to run the shop, and that's how I did it. They would run the shop while I was out traveling, and I was gone weeks on end. So it was crazy. It was a great period of time.
And what is it like when you go pro? Like, what has to happen for you to actually get your pro card or whatever they do in snowboarding?
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of sports, it basically just comes down to, it's the point where you start getting paid. Being an amateur rider versus being a pro rider really wasn't a massive difference in terms of level and everything you're doing. The difference was I had a contract that paid me to do what I was doing. So you're physically being compensated in the form of a salary. Mine wasn't. Mine was just draws on a monthly basis that I got, and then travel budgets and everything else. So that was what signified you as a pro. Yep. And then obviously you had a snowboard company that would endorse you, put you in magazines, put you in their catalogs. And this kind of midway through my professional career was when the energy drinks like Red Bull and Monster got really, really into snowboarding. And at that point, like the top pros would get on one of these energy drink teams. I was fortunate enough, first I got on Monster. So I rode that whole upward rise with Monster, and I had a bunch of other sponsors, but that was like my big one that paid me more than anybody else. But then Red Bull kind of came into our market, and when we'd go to the contest, we'd have the helmet, or back then we had beanies because we didn't actually wear helmets as much back then. And I had the Monster beanie, and the Red Bull rep saw me. He's like, hey, have you ever thought about Red Bull? And I'm like, well, I was that cocky little snowboard kid, and I'm like, well, whoever pays me the most gets me. So we didn't have a contract with Monster, and Red Bull ended up making a pretty good offer, and I started riding for Red Bull on top of the other sponsors. It was really fun, but I wanted to ride for Red Bull because the contests that they put on were invite only, so only Red Bull athletes could attend them. Okay. So I wanted to ride in their contests, like especially this one called Heavy Metal, which was a handrail contest that they would do in like city backgrounds. Yeah. And the first one one was in Niagara Falls that they ever did. It was before the convention center got torn down and became the casino, and it was on all those handrails there. I ended up just eating it on one of the rails and almost breaking my hip, but that's for another story.
Damn, man. And then as that carried on for a few years or whatever, how did you eventually get out of that and into, did you go right into what you're doing now? Did you go into,
No. So I had my shops and I was expanding. So this is 1999. I had opened a shop in Orchard Park, which is like a little ski town here. It was my third store, and it was a boutique. And right after that, as you probably are aware, the dot-com crash happened, and that was along lines of 9/11 and everything else. And I'll never forget that. I was pretty young. I was in my 20s at that time, and I had never known what a recession was. You hear about it, but I never knew what it was. And now we're in a recession, and my retail stores are just struggling. I mean, sales had dropped like 30%. Everything but the kitchen sink was being thrown at me. We had issues with the merchant services contract that we had, and then they dug up the whole road in front of Orchard Park store. So like I had this recession happening, and my stores were suffering, so I put together a resume. Now, the thing that the audience that I'm talking to has to understand is at this point, like I really had no professional experience outside of, I was an entrepreneur from the age of 16, right to this point. I went to about 2 years of community college for business, and everything else on the resume was just accolades to snowboarding in my retail store. So I had no professional experience, but I needed a job. So my friend Mike worked at Little Caesars. I applied there. They said they weren't hiring delivery drivers, so that door shut. And I put my resume out. It was kind of like what Indeed would be today. I don't even remember it. And I started getting phone calls from financial firms. And I remember the first one I got was an interview to go for this Wall Street firm. And I'm thinking, what? I don't even own a suit. My grandma took me and got me a suit with a zip-up tie. And that was like so foreign to me. You got to understand, I wore hoodies and beanies every day of my life. And now I'm putting a suit on for an interview. And I had no clue what Wall Street was about outside of the movie Wall Street with Michael Douglas. So I went to the interview, and lo and behold, they ended up hiring me. I didn't stay at that firm, but I ended up getting my catapult, and that's how I got into Wall Street, and that evolved. But you got to remember, I didn't shut my stores down. I didn't stop snowboarding. I didn't stop anything I was doing. I just changed the way that I did it. Instead of working in the store from 9 or 10 in the morning until 9 at night, what I would do is I would work the night shift. I would have my guys, Randy and Nate and a bunch of other guys that were working for me at that point, work the morning shift, which they were thrilled to do. And then after I was done working the Wall Street job, I would go to the store and work like 5 or 6 till 9 o'clock. I would do the closing, and then I would work weekends. So that's how I did it in the beginning. So I had money coming in from the Wall Street firm, and then I had my shops going on. So I was kind of playing both sides. And then I fell in love with the Wall Street side of things. I really enjoyed it. I was making more money there. So I started working on Fat Man and started working on the business, marketing campaigns, built a snowboard and skateboard team, a video production unit. I don't think I would have done any of that stuff had I been working in the shop. But now because I was working on it and working on the business, I just changed the whole way I ran the business. And I started making more money, started having more fun. And then the Wall Street business was able to flourish. And that's kind of how I got into the finance game.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny how things, when we're going through them, seem like so permanent and like miserable? And it's like dark. And you're like, why is this happening? And then you look back and you're like, oh shit, thank God it happened. Just like thank God Little Caesars wasn't hiring.
Yeah, seriously. What would I have become had I got that job at Little Caesars, right? Delivering pizzas. Because he was making a bunch of money delivering pizzas, and that's all I needed was a couple bucks.
Yeah, but you were thinking, your thinking wasn't big. It was like, you know what I mean? And we all go through this. But you know what I started doing, Chris? I started doing, and I wrote this book called Rocket Fuel, Convert Your Setbacks, Become Unstoppable, right? And I had this thing where I started realizing like everything we go through is happening for the reason that we need it to.
Yeah.
Why are we getting so upset when it happens? Why not be a freak and be like, yes, this is awesome. Something amazing's getting ready to happen. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to set my attention out now and pay attention to everything because something amazing's happening.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I went through a lot of those same things where, when bad things happen, like when, the recession happened and I had all those issues going on with the stores, I blamed everything else. Yeah. I blamed all the surrounding situations. I blamed, business partners that were going bad. I blamed everybody. And somebody one day, and I'm trying to remember the name of this book, and your audience is going to laugh, but handed me a Dr. Phil book. And I read this book, and it was all about taking ownership of your problems because no one else cares. They're your problems. And I read this book and it just snapped. I was just like, you know what? It's my problem. I got to deal with it. But I also started taking on the standpoint that this is actually meant to happen, because like that Wall Street thing, I was not into that. Like at first I hated it. Suit was weird. Like I just knew nothing.
Were you guys on the phones? Is that what you were doing?
Dude,
phones?
we were just in the bullpen, man. We just pounded the phone, connected the phone calls with the guys on the outside, and that's how that. Just like you see in the movies, that's exactly how it was.
Have you ever heard of Ross Mandel?
I've heard the name. I'm not sure if I would connect the dots.
Yeah. He had American Greed written about him. He's a friend of mine. And he got locked up for 9 or 10 years. But long story. But I didn't know if you've heard of him because he was out there on Wall Street and took the first company public on the first stock brokerage public on the London Stock Exchange.
Wow.
And they had less regulations there. So then the SEC went after him because he was, So anyway, that's a long story, but I'll introduce you to him at some point because you guys probably have a lot to talk about.
Story.
He has a great podcast too. So you could, we'll get you on there.
Definitely. And I'm sure he would say the same thing. One door closes and another door opens. It's just, that's life, right? And I was just in Indianapolis for the Indy 500, and I drove down there, and I was driving back about 10 hours, and I made my cousin, who I brought, listen to Who Moved My Cheese. And if none of you have listened to that book or read that book, Who Moved My Cheese, it's all about what you said. So we just got to sometimes just take things for what they are and just go with the flow and stop getting comfortable in the literally, like at this point in my life, the uncomfortable world is more comfortable for me than being comfortable.
Yeah, how often do you cause problems on purpose to keep things from being comfortable?
Too much. And I'm trying to stop that because like I'm a visionary by nature. So I'm always on to the next thing. So I'm trying to like just get, my lane and just stay in it and just kind of push further. And I've been doing a lot better, but I constantly create problems just because that's where I feel comfortable.
Yeah. Well, it also creates uncomfortability for you and other people when you start doing it. And I think there's a line there that you just don't cross it, but there's a opportunity there to do that,
I would agree.
Yeah. So then you're Wall Street learning the stuff there, learning how to make calls, build rapport and all that kind of thing. And then obviously you're picking some things up and starting to understand how money works.
I was learning how money worked, but I was learning how money worked in the context of that's what Wall Street wanted me to know. Yeah. And they were very good. And I was with a huge firm, and I'm not going to say the name, but they were good at keeping you in the lane. And when you started like kind of going outside the lane or asking about this or that, they'd bring you right back into it and say, no, this is what you should be doing. So the truth about money, what I teach today and how to take back control of your money is nothing that I learned in Wall Street. Matter of fact, everything I learned in Wall Street, I had to unlearn to be able to do what I do today because it's the complete opposite of what we're taught to do with money. And I did not learn that as a financial advisor. Never, not once was I shown what I do today in those 16 years that I was a financial advisor. Not even close. I had heard about it. I had, heard rumors of people doing this privatized banking or BOLI, which is bank owned, and I just never dove deep into it. And that didn't happen until I got into the real estate field because 2008 hit. I was an advisor and I was developing a retail plaza, which was an old paint store. And it just kind of folded in on me. And I just almost lost everything, almost went bankrupt. If it wasn't for my girlfriend, who's now my wife, paying the bills and helping me out, I would have lost everything. But that kind of, when that happened, it forced me to start looking at other things. And after the Great Recession, real estate was so cheap. And I was a big Warren Buffett guy, fundamentals and buy low, sell high, right? So I just said, all right, real estate is the thing to invest in. So when everything fell apart, I started buying apartment buildings and I did them with peanuts. I literally hardly had any money because I got wiped out in 2008 because I was all in stocks. So now I'm like, I want tangible assets. I want real assets. And I started buying apartment buildings and I got up to 36 units by 2014. And then I lost it all again. And I lost it all again because I got leveraged. I was believing in banks. I had relationships with this bank and this banker who just kept giving me loans. And then one day I went in for my 37th door, this property that I needed funding for. And he said, no, the bank can't lend you any more money. You don't fit in the little square box called debt to income ratio. And that was it. The whole thing unraveled. I had to sell all of those properties. I ended up coming out ahead a little bit, had to sell that strip mall, which I made a bunch of money on. But that's what got me and my wife into flipping is I was like, I'm done with this. So I started borrowing from private lenders and hard money lenders and started flipping houses. And that's how we got our show on HGTV. But this is where I learned this infinite banking concepts. I learned it from a very wealthy real estate investor who was lending me money. And I was in Salt Lake City snowboarding, so I asked him to meet me for lunch to show him a deal. And in that meeting, I just said to him, Mike, how do you lend all this money? Because someone up to this point had said the ultimate in real estate is being the bank, and Mike was the bank. And I'm like, all right, how are you lending all this money? And he just dropped it on me. It's where he kind of laid it out. And, being a financial advisor, I will tell you, if you know a financial advisor, their ego is their problem, because that was my problem. I thought I knew everything there was to know about money. And then this really wealthy guy literally just body slammed me. Not really, but like with what he told me. And I realized I have a lot to learn.
All right. So let me just put this out there, because I teach my kids this all the time. The biggest barrier to learning is thinking you know everything.
At 100%.
And then you got to say why. Well, why is because you lack curiosity and you fail to be observant, and you close up. And so many people, I know a lot of financial advisors that are like that. And I try not to be like that, man. I have a tendency to, because I'm Italian and I'm hard-headed. But as I've gotten older, man, I've learned so much in the last, probably since I hit my 40s, 48 years now. I've learned the most. And just because I've been more humble, you know what I mean? And it's been great. So,
dude, something happens. I don't know what it is. And, I was told this: when you're in your 30s, you think you know everything. Things are starting to work. Sometimes your business is starting to go, and you're starting to make a little bit of money, and you start thinking you know everything. It's ego. And then something in the 40s happens where you start learning about wisdom. You slow down. You're more receptive to learn. You're open to kind of new concepts and new things that you would have shunned away in your 30s. And Will Rogers, back to what you were saying with your kids, because I tell my daughter this, she's only 5, but the biggest problem in America is not what people don't know. The biggest problem in America is what people think that they know that just ain't so. Will Rogers said that, and how profound is that statement?
Mm-hmm. Huge. That's huge.
Massive.
So Mike tells you about this, and then your first reaction is like, no way.
Well, let me I'll take just a minute or two to explain how that conversation went. It's seared in my brain. So I said, so Mike, how do you lend all this money? And his first reaction, without flinching, he says, well, I lend from my private bank. And I'm like, of course you do, Mike. Oh my God, duh, you have a bank. Well, and I literally said to him, I said, hey, Mike, after lunch, can you show me the bank? I want to see it. Thinking as though he owned a bank. And he says, I don't own a bank. I created my own private banking system. And I said, I'm an advisor, so I'm like, tell me about it, Mike. And he says, well, I changed one thing, and that is where my money goes first. I'm like, okay, one change, where his money goes first. And I said, and he keeps going. He says, my money, where I put it, is guaranteed to earn an interest rate no matter what. And I'm thinking, okay, guaranteed for how long? Because being an advisor, I'm like, you can guarantee money for 3 years, 5 years, and he's like, guaranteed at the same rate for the rest of my life. So now he stumped me, because I'm like, what in the world could that be? But he goes on. He says, then I get paid dividends every single year, and they've never, ever not paid a dividend. Because I don't know what this is he's talking about. Right. And then he goes on, he says, and my interest and dividends grow tax-free. So in my mind... You're
thinking stock stuff.
Dude, I'm compartmentalizing everything he's saying. First, guaranteed interest rate. I'm thinking of all the things that could be a guaranteed interest rate, right? And that's my box. And then he's like, dividends. I'm like, dividends. Okay, that could be this. And then he says tax-free. And I'm thinking, Roth? But a Roth doesn't fit these other boxes, but okay, a Roth. And then he goes on and says it's protected against judgments and liens. And then he drops this on me. He says, so Chris, let me give you an example. You come to me with a deal like this. I decide I want to lend on it after I do my due diligence. And then what I do is I go to my private bank and I take a loan. So I'm articulating this loan. He takes a loan. And then I give that money to you. I'm like, okay, he took a loan, of course, his private bank, and he gives it to me. And then he says, you pay me interest on that money, and every month I take the interest you give me and I put it back in the place where the money started, back in my private bank. And I'm like, okay, so in my mind, if all of you are just thinking about this, it's a circle. His money started on the left side of the circle in this magic place that paid guaranteed interest, dividends in a tax-free environment, protection, and all these things. Then he's taking loans from this place. So go around the top part of the circle if you're following with me and you're listening. Now the money goes to me. I'm the investment, because he knows, likes, and understands real estate. So he invests money by making loans to me in a collateralized position. I pay him interest, bottom part of the circle. He recycles and recaptures the interest I give him back into his private bank, which is repaying the loan that he just made from his private bank. Got that? So it's a circle. But then he tells me, and this is the part that just floored me. He says, and Chris, when I give you the money, my money never left the account. So my money is earning uninterrupted compounding interest. So whatever money I had in my private bank, even though I gave it to you, I'm still earning interest and dividends uninterrupted because the money I took wasn't my money. And I'm thinking, whose money was that then? But just think about it. So his money's always earning interest and dividends, tax-free. He's giving it to me. I'm paying him interest again. So now this dude's making money twice on the same dollar. And I'm paying him interest, and he's taking the money, putting it right back, refilling the pot, and repaying down the loan. And I'm just like, dude, Mike, what is this? I need this. My clients need this. And he says, Chris, you know exactly what this is. You're an advisor. How do you not know what this is? And I'm like, oh boy. Man. Yeah, I do know what this is. But just tell me, what is it? And he says, well, Chris, it's a specially designed and engineered whole life insurance policy from a mutually owned company that pays dividends. And I'm like, no. Literally, I in my mind, and I think I might have even said this, I'm like, no. I'm thinking somebody bamboozled Mike, because now that he tells me what the thing is, the widget, the machine, I'm thinking it doesn't work that way. No way a whole life can do all that. You can't just put money in a whole life and immediately take that money out. It doesn't do half that things you just mentioned. But again, Will Rogers, the biggest problem is not what we don't know, it's what we think we know that just ain't so. So now I'm kind of caught in this weird place where Mike is telling me all this, but I'm not believing half of it. And I'm like, all right, Mike, well, help me get started. Help me get this. And he says, I can't. This guy, Brent, helped me set up. I said, well, give me Brent's number. So he gives me Brent's number. I end the meeting at Cheesecake Factory. Didn't go to Mike's bank because he doesn't have a bank. He's got this privatized banking system. And I call Brent up, and I'm just rattling all this off to Brent. And Brent stops me, and he says, Chris, thank you so much for calling. He says, have you watched the 90-minute video? And I'm thinking, Mike didn't say anything about a 90-minute video. Dude, I'm a financial advisor, Brent. I don't need to watch a 90-minute video. I know what whole life is. I just need this banking thing here, this infinite banking concepts. He says, Chris, I'm going to send you my video and watch the video. And after you're done, shoot me a message and we'll set up a call. So now he literally put a barrier in front of me to talk to him. I got to watch this dumb video. So I go down on Sunday with a big cup of coffee, pad of paper, and I'm like, I got to watch this dumb video. I tell him, Larissa, my wife, I'm like, I got to watch this stupid video before this guy will talk to me.
Great attitude, Chris.
Yeah, seriously. But like, this is what it was like, folks. I'm just telling you, this is exactly how it was. And I remember I hit play. I didn't take a single sip of coffee. I had like 4 or 5 pages of notes, and I swear to you, 90 minutes went by like it was 10 minutes, and I had just seen the fountain of wealth. I literally now understood it. I fully articulated it, and all I could think about is how I need to get going with this. But remember, this was just a specially designed whole life, but it wasn't the whole life that was making all the money. It was the process that came back. So in order to do what I teach today, all I do, and you know this, but it's so simple, I tell people how to change one thing, and that is where their savings goes first, and how to add one step, which is the process called the infinite banking concept. One change, one step will completely change your financial future as it did mine, and it will put you back in control of your money and allow you to take back all of the banking functions that you've given away to the traditional banks and never, ever leak any interest to anybody else. And that's what I teach to thousands and thousands of people today.
Great stuff, dude. I love how you articulate it too. But you've done it again.
I remember like it was yesterday.
Yeah, but you've said this story over and over again, and it's powerful when you do this. Most people don't understand that when they need to have a great story for people to hear, they don't understand how many times you got to do it. You got to start somewhere, but you got to do it. I mean, I've told my story thousands of times. I don't know how many times have you done it? Probably 2,000, 3,000, 5,000.
Easy.
Yeah, and it's great, man.
But it's no different with anything you do in your life, like snowboarding. Like I had to hit jumps hundreds, if not thousands of times to learn the tricks I did to go on and become an amateur and be a professional, right? It's no different. You just change the label on it and what it is you're learning about.
Yep, 100%. And then, so is there a time where people should not be doing this, and then do they need to get to a certain point where they're doing this? Is it just that they have extra cash flow?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
This is very important. And if anyone has ever read The Richest Man in Babylon, it's a book. It's hard to read, but I've got videos that I've created called The 6 Laws of Wealth. You must first follow the first law, which is you must keep 10% of what you make. So in order to start with what we do, you have to be saving money, which is the first law of wealth. Because if you're not saving, if you're spending every penny, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, what we do, it just won't work because you can't save money. And without the savings component, the other 5 laws of wealth don't work. So that's what somebody has to be doing. And people are always like, well, what's the minimum? Okay, so how we've articulated the minimum is take your age. I'm 48. I think I'm 48. It's funny, as you get into your late 40s, you forget how old you are.
77?
47 or 48, but let's just call it 48 years old.
Yep.
The guy was born in 77. I swear, folks, that wasn't made up. I literally just had to question how old I was. I'm 48, correct. So if I'm 48, I add a 0 to my age. That's 480. That's the minimum monthly amount in order for me to start my own private banking system is 480. So take your age, folks. If you're 60, add a 0. If you're 20, add a 0. Okay, that's your minimum monthly amount to start your own private banking system.
Wow, that's how it works? Is that 0?
What we found works, yeah. And any less than that, you're shortcutting yourself because you're not able to save enough money to make it work.
Yeah. What about the entrepreneurs out there that have startups and they're getting things going, they're starting to generate revenue? See, my thing is that this is what I always thought was right, and you can correct me. Invest in yourself first, in your skills, so you can create more money, right? Create more revenue. Invest then second into your business. If you have a business, start building systems, process, technology, invest in your people, generate the revenue. And then once that happens, then you're looking for the other vehicles to invest in.
I don't disagree with any of those, but just in the second phase. So first, invest in yourself. Don't do what I teach with investing in yourself. Invest in yourself. Get to learn what it is you're doing. I think everybody, before you start a business, you need to start a business in something that you know, like, and understand, and that you're passionate about. And when I'm talking to young folks about starting a business, I'm like, would you do it for free? And they kind of look at me dumb, like, what do you mean would I do it for? No, seriously, would you do this if you never got paid to do it? And if your answer is yes, then that's the business you go into. Because just so you know, most business owners will not make any money in the first couple of years of their business, period. So if you won't do it for free, well, then you're never going to make it in business. But where you said after that, you start investing in your business. To invest in your business, you're going to need to hire personnel, get teams. You're going to need probably equipment or supplies or things like that. And in that case, then yes, you could use the infinite banking concept in your own private banking system. So instead of using a bank account to buy that stuff, why don't you use your own banking system, use that money to buy the goods and services, make loans to your company, or just start the policies up in your company's name, and then you buy things using this. Because remember, I said you can make money twice on the same dollar. So then you use this money, you buy things, and your company, as it makes money, because when you do this, when you take a loan from your own private bank, you set the rules. There is no set prepayment penalty or prepayment amount, right? You should always repay your bank, because obviously you wouldn't steal from a bank, so why steal from yours? But you could repay any terms you want. You can't do that at a traditional bank. So if you're starting a company, you're going to a traditional bank for a loan to buy, computers, let's just say. That bank is going to set and control the terms of your deal. Let's just say prior to that, you took some of the revenue while you were kind of getting into this and you put it into your own banking system. Then you took a loan from your bank and you bought the equipment, the computers, and then you repaid yourself the same exact amount you would have paid the traditional bank. Now you're not leaking any interest to them. You're keeping it all. But then if things go south and business gets tough and you can't make the monthly payment, here's all you need to do. You go to a mirror in your house or your business, you look into it and you say, hey, listen, I'm going through some hard times. I kind of need a couple months off of these payments. What do you say? And yourself will look back at you and say, sure, yeah, whenever you can start repaying, then repay it. Because you are the bank, you make the rules. Thou with the gold makes the rules. And when you control the banking functions in your life, you control all of that.
Yeah, and then as far as if you have a company, you can do it as a company, and it's also
company-owned life insurance.
Yeah, and it's also tax-free as well because it's
right.
a loan. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, banks are the biggest purchasers of this. So, if you ever question like, oh, I don't know about that. Okay, well then why are banks the number one purchasers of whole life in the world? Like, look it up, BOLI, B-O-L-I, go to FDIC.gov and look up how much traditional banks own of BOLI. That's what I do. It's just the privatized side.
Yeah, makes sense. All right. Well, the other thing is I need to know the reason that you decided to start teaching this versus just doing it yourself.
That's a really good question. So I guess I'm not as rehearsed on this one, but I learned from this guy, Brent. and I started using it in my life. I had a lot of debt from all the real estate stuff. So I started paying debt back because that works really good for paying debt back. Then after that, I started using it to fund my business. Back then I had a real estate education company called Flip Out Academy. So I remember many times where we had no money to make payroll. So I would borrow from my policies, make a loan to my company, and then have my company repay me. Ask Shauna, my director of operations. One day she thought she wasn't going to be able to cash her check, and I did that. So I kind of kept going through that process in my own life. And here's how it happened. I was running this RIA at my facility where we didn't, have real estate investors come in, and I would invite Brent out once a month to teach this audience about this infinite banking concepts. I'd sit in the back of the room, he'd be in the front doing his thing, and at the end, people raise their hand to ask questions. I'm sitting in the back answering the questions before he's able to. One day he shows up to the RIA, and my wife noticed this. She was my fiance then, but she noticed that he was really tired, and she said, Chris, you should offer to help him. And I said, oh, yeah, because we always would go out for pizza after. And she says, okay, when we go out for dinner, make sure you offer him your services and just say, hey, listen, how can I help? Can I go out and speak and teach this, blah, blah, blah. You're doing it from the back of the room already. I said, yeah, all right. Dinner came, almost done with dinner. It was kind of eerie quiet. My wife wasn't saying anything because she's just staring at me the whole time, wondering when I'm going to ask Brent if I can help him. And then I didn't, and we're almost done. He's almost ready to pay the bill. And out of nowhere, my wife kicks me super hard in the shin.
That's a lady there.
And Brent notices. He says, oh my God, everything okay? And Larissa says, no, Chris has something to tell you. And I'm like, I do? Oh, I do. Yeah, hey, Brent, you look tired. If you ever need any help doing this, I think I could do this presentation. I could go around and speak, and we could just do more. Two people can do more than one. So let me know if you need any help. And he's like, absolutely. I absolutely would be interested in that. So then I was getting ready to fly to Florida to meet with him and his wife about this. And my wife, before I got on the plane, asked me, so show me what you're going to show them. So I pull out this fancy presentation I did, which was my company. And she's like, no, wait a second. Why are you're presenting? Yeah, I'm going to show him my company, and I can go out and speak. He can do the money multiplier. I can do my company. And I had this whole different idea because I was being selfish. And she says, we got in this huge argument. And she's like, you're going to not bring any of this. And you're going to go out there and you're going to ask him how you can serve him instead of yourself. And I did. I went out there and I just, all my guard down. I said, how can I be of service? And that was where it all began. We formulated what we created today. And today we're the largest in the space.
And what was your company at the time? Real estate investing?
It was called Flip Out Academy, and I had just started a company called Money School where we were teaching these concepts, within our real estate curriculum.
Okay, got it. Okay, and then that's how it took off. All right.
Yeah, Money School is the company today. Money School, BYOB. I mean, that's still the company.
Yeah, all right, I love it, man. And then you go around speaking and all that, and then people come in. And do you have opportunity to you have your life insurance license and all that too, so you can?
Oh yeah, in every state. And I've got a whole team. Everybody's licensed in every state. Yep.
Yeah. So if people are interested, they can come to you, learn about it, and then also it's like a one-stop shop.
They'd learn about it. They would apply it in their life because obviously nobody could go out and do what we do until they're already using it in their life. That's a rule. Yep. And it's kind of funny that 90-minute video still exists today. So when people want to learn about this, I just send them to my website and I just say, watch the 90-minute video and then book a call with us and we'll talk about what your needs and goals are. Because we're never trying to sell anything to anybody because you don't need to with what we do. We just teach them how to solve their problem. And if we can solve their problem using this concept and this process, then they're going to ask us, okay, well, show me how I can get started. Because that's how I did it. I asked Brent to help me. He didn't ask me to buy.
And he didn't try to sell you. He didn't try to sell you on a call.
And we don't try to sell anybody anything. Yeah, we just solve a problem and then they ask for our help.
Yep. All right. Now let's talk about this as the time winds down here. We want to touch on the evolution of this and how's it changed since you've been in it and how are things affected by maybe the economy or whatever.
The biggest change was COVID, like it was for so many of you. I mean, we were on the road speaking every single week at events, and then all of a sudden that just shut off. I'm in Disney getting ready to speak to a packed event, and no one showed up because the president shut the country down that very day, and I had to get a flight home that night. So everything just shut off. So I had to either say, okay, well, I guess we're done, or flip and completely become somebody who I wasn't, which was a personality on social media. And it started right there in Disney. I had all my staff that was with me grab their phones. We did a live stream where I taught exactly what I was going to teach at the event. live to a Facebook. Back then it was a Facebook Live, because all the things that exist today don't. And since then I've built social media. My YouTube channel's been my biggest platform, but we have just leaned in, and I'm a visionary. So I'm always like, okay, what could this business look like in 5 years? And then what I do is I just create what that vision is from 5 years from today. I create that now. And
yeah, and then the COVID happened, and you guys now are producing shit tons of content online.
Yeah.
And then when things started to open back up, did you go back to live stuff?
I did, but I was so busy filming content for all the social media that it was hard for me to do the level of speaking I was. So I actually was teaching my mentors how to speak. So we actually would pay for them to get speaker coaching, and we sent them out. But we had webinars at that point. We do 6 webinars every week. So we created webinars where our mentors could practice the 90-minute presentation on a webinar, and we would pay to put butts in seats on the webinar, and they would get comfortable doing this. So then when they're ready to go out on the road and speak live, we would just put them on stages, and they would do the presentation so that I could focus on what I really want, which is working on the business. And I don't have to so much be away from my family being on the road, although I say that. And, earlier this year, I was on the road every week for 4 months straight. Funny how that works.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that's what has evolved.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that noise was. Apologize for that loud noise, everybody. All right, Chris, where can people go deeper with you? I know you said your website. Chris.
It's easy. YouTube is my best. You just go there. It's the Chris Naugle, Naugle. If you want to watch the 90-minute video, just go to chrisnaugle.com, and it'll pop up. So watch the video, book a call, and let's see if we can solve a problem for you.
Amazing, dude. You're amazing. I picked that up the first time I saw you. At one of the events, I think it was C-Roc, and glad to be working with you now and getting this message out. You know what's cool about what I do with the podcast stuff, and my team is amazing. What like, we can attach ourselves to other people's missions without having to be the experts in each thing, whether it's wealth, whether it's health, biohacking, longevity stuff, all kinds of different things that we're involved with. And I'm impacting this world now by getting people out further faster. So I'm glad and thankful that you allow us to do that for you, and I want to keep going further and faster. Let's go.
All right.
Hang tight while I wrap this up. Thanks for your time today, brother.
Thank
folks,
you.
You've been listening to Chris Naugle. He is that one. And I hope you guys liked it and got something out of this. But take action. We got to take action. We hear something a lot of times. The execution is the part that gets you somewhere. So make sure you do that. Go subscribe or follow. I don't know what button's on your favorite podcast platform right now, what you're listening on, but hit that button at the top and keep coming back. Until next time, it's your boy C-Roc here. Be that one.